All right. It is Thursday, September 25th, backdrop day, as usual, for a Thursday, because every Thursday is backdrop day. Um, we are here for our weekly meeting where we give you an update on how we're progressing with creating Backdrop CMS and getting it ready for initial release. Backdrop CMS is a feature-rich content management system that will have comparable features to Drupal 8, but on an architecture that's more similar to that of Drupal 7. And the reason we're working on this is because we think there are a whole bunch of people that already have sites running Drupal 7 that aren't going to be able to afford to upgrade them to Drupal 8, and there are a whole bunch of people who maintain code for Drupal 7 and either aren't interested in learning everything new for Drupal 8 or aren't able to commit to upgrading all of their code from Drupal 7 to Drupal 8. So we want to build a system that works just like Drupal 7 in terms of how the code works, but that can have new features and all of the solutions that we're all looking forward to in Drupal 8. And obviously there's been a bunch of work happening in Drupal 8, and we're not going to be able to have all of that same stuff when we first release Backdrop, but we're going to include the most important things, and we're going to add all of the additional updates in the near future. So we'll work towards creating the same kind of product with a very different code style and architecture in the back end. While we're doing these things, we're hoping to fix bugs, bugs that are already existing in Drupal 7 and Drupal 8, as well as any other bugs that we find along the way. And hopefully we'll be able to simplify some of the existing systems. We already understand that Drupal 7 is too complicated, too hard for new people to learn, too slow to develop for, and we want to improve those things by simplifying all of the systems that are already there. But we can only do that without breaking APIs, because one of the things that we're trying to focus on is making Backdrop as similar to Drupal 7 as possible. So we're going to simplify things as long as we don't have to change APIs very much. And the same is true for new features. We'll add those new features, the things that we think are super important, but as long as it doesn't require too much change. So Drupal 7 and Backdrop should be very similar. Backdrop 1 and Backdrop 2 should be very similar. So API change is going to be kept to a minimum the whole time. Our timeline, we're hoping to have Backdrop 1.0.0 out this fall. It is now fall. So it is the season, which means we've got to start wrapping up all of the stuff that we're working on, giving the product its last bit of polish, and trying to make something that is going to be a really convincing tool for people to use here in the next few months, which will be great. And then we get to start working on creating sites with it and creating a contrib environment and seeing how all that goes too. After 1.0.0 is released, we will continue to release updates on a regular basis. So things that don't get into 1.0.0 will get into 1.1 or 1.2. Bug fixes will go into those minor releases, and hopefully we'll continue to move the project forward on a rapid pace, which will be exciting. So things that we're working on. We've got 3 major new projects that went into Backdrop 1.0.0 that aren't going to be aren't in Drupal 7, so things that you want that aren't in Core and 7. The biggest one is blocks and layout, our blocks and layout solution, and this is something that Nate's been spending the last few months on. And Nate, do you want to give us an update on where we are right now?
Yeah, so since last week, after the meeting, I published a new preview video of layouts and where they are currently, which has been gathering a lot of interest from people out there. Bojan came back and did a UX review of it and made some great suggestions that we'll need to implement. As far as merging into Backdrop Core, currently working on resolving all of the test failures, which really are not so much test failures. They're really just adjustments that need to be made to our tests, since block module is no longer responsible for positioning blocks. There's dozens of tests that all assume that block module is the tool for doing layouts. So I have to update all of the tests to make them work with the new code base. But that's going swimmingly. I keep pushing pretty regularly, almost daily basis, continuing to get the tests going. We're about 3/4 of the way through fixing all of the tests. And then after that, the big holdup is that we need to write replacement tests that check the basic layout functionality and just make sure that the layout system is fully functioning. For anyone that's out there that wants to help with that endeavor, issue 86 in the Backdrop issue queue, there's a link to the sandbox where all of this work is going on. It's not quite pull request ready because the tests are still failing, but it is ready for end user testing to see if we can figure out any problems within the code base just from users clicking around and trying out different things. So it's looking really good. I'm really excited about the functionality that we've got and where it's heading. I still think that it'll be ready to merge in the next couple of weeks. So it's a great time to get in feedback. But yeah, that's where we are. We're looking really good on blocks and layouts.
Yay! So that's super exciting. That's going to be the one killer feature that Drupal 8 doesn't have yet. They might get it in the near future, but we're going to have it in first. And hopefully, we've obviously stolen a bunch of great code from what Drupal 8's been doing. Maybe they'll take a look at what we're doing and be like, oh yeah, we want that too. So that would be pretty cool. I'm really excited about getting that because it's going to solve a lot of our problems with the theme layer and a bunch of other stuff as well. So yay, blocks and layouts. Other things that we're working on, things that you can't live without, CMI and config management. This is something that doesn't exist in Drupal 7. We currently are using this features module to manage how we deploy changes from local to live or from one site to another. It's the best tool we have. It's the only tool we really have in order to manage this. And it's not ideal. People who've worked with features for a while start to see its shortcomings, and that's why we've decided as a community that we need a better solution. Drupal 8 has implemented CMI. Backdrop has also implemented it. So if you want to keep using all of your Drupal 7-like stuff, but you need CMI, you want to use it right now, this is going to be a huge killer feature for Backdrop. We've got Drupal 7-like thing with CMI in it. So it's basically Drupal 7 plus CMI, which is great. And we've got the subsystem in core already, and we've got some conversions underway, which is great. We do need to finish our conversions before we can release Backdrop 1.0.0. This is a release blocker for us. If we have CMI in core, but we aren't using it for things like content types and fields, we don't really have CMI. I mean, yeah, the system's there, people can write code against it, but if we can't get our primary building blocks of what makes a Backdrop site exporting to code, then it's not really going to be as good a selling point as we want it to be. So we need some help with that. Since last week, we've started converting some other stuff. So theme settings was an issue that I've been working on for a while and ran into some problems with it, and Nate came in and fixed them, which is great. So we've got theme settings converted. We've also moved locations of things to make them make a little bit more sense. And color module, also settings are now using CMI. So we're getting things one piece at a time converted. It would be great to have kind of more hands on deck and help us with some of the bigger conversions so that we can move that forward too. And that will, of course, hold up our release, so that is our next highest priority item. Other things that we're working on, major things that have happened in Backdrop Core, is moving views into Core. So views is the #1 downloaded contributed module. It helps you build listings of things. It's in Core in Drupal 8, it's in Core in Backdrop, and what we need to do is convert some of the listings that come from Core into a view. So like your front page. By default, that was a list of nodes, right, in Drupal 7. We need that to be a view of nodes in Backdrop. So having someone build that view for us and get that config file, because views will save to config, ready for us to include would be great. Same thing for other listings that are in Core, and we've got an issue there that will help guide people to which things need to be converted and what state they're in. So if anyone has site building skills and want to help us set up the views, that would be a great first step for that also. So some of those conversions are really straightforward. Some of the ones like admin listings are a little bit more involved, but I think getting the front end ones converted is highest priority, and that's probably maybe our only release blocker related to views. Having it in Core was the biggest thing, and we've got that. I think if we had to ship without admin listings converted, we would be fine. We could change that at some point later. So those are the 3 things: blocks and layouts, which is almost done, which is great; config management, which is in but needs conversion; and views, which is also in and needs help with some more conversions.
Yeah, let's not call blocks and layouts almost done, but
well, almost in.
Almost ready, yeah.
Almost ready. Okay.
Yeah, it'll be
Almost
an ongoing thing, because we've got after our initial inclusion, we've got tons of blocks that we'll want to include. Placing individual fields and eventually being able to lay out forms like you can in panels. So we've got a lot of work after the initial inclusion for sure.
Okay. So other things we're working on, we're trying to keep up with what Drupal is doing, and we're doing that in two different ways. Number one, we want to make sure that everything that has been committed to latest versions of Drupal 7, all those bugs have been fixed and those improvements have been made to Backdrop as well. So trying to make sure that we go through the commit log for latest version of Drupal 7 and get those commits ported over. It looks like we've got one issue left with a couple of commits there that need to be added or merged in. And then we also need to make sure that any security fixes that have been applied to Drupal 7 also happen to Backdrop, and we've got 3 of those remaining. And then we're also taking a look at what Drupal 8 is doing, and there's obviously a lot of stuff happening there every day, and we don't want to include all of the commits that are happening to Drupal 8, but we have subdivided them into a couple of lists of things that we think are important to get included in Backdrop as well, and these are things like including HTML5 elements, cleaning up the CSS and JavaScript, and there's a bunch of other groups like the CMI conversions and views conversions that are included in those other issues too. So we've got these lists of things that we want to focus on, and any other bug fixes that come along the way as well, we'll get those under control and merged in as they come up. So we've got some meta issues if people want to work on those. Those are fairly straightforward, pretty easy if you only got a couple minutes and you want to tackle those. They're low-hanging fruit, so to speak. And then there's a couple of minor things that we're working on too. These are not release blockers, but they are things that we would like to improve in Backdrop. The first one is making sure that Backdrop looks and feels different from Drupal. So if you install it and you start using it, it shouldn't feel like you're using Drupal 8 or Drupal 7. It should stand on its own. And we're doing that in a couple of different ways. We've got a new administration theme look and feel underway. We reconnected with our designer, Julia, last week and made sure that she was able to do what she needed to do to our style guide, which is also on GitHub. So she's going to go ahead and make some updates there, and then we'll have kind of a good starting point for what we want our administration experience to feel like, and we'll go ahead and create some issues that involve incorporating her code into the admin theme for Backdrop. Another thing that we're looking at doing is cleaning up the entire theme system. We want to make Backdrop more appealing to front-end developers. It's been problematic for Drupal for a while, and we want to kind of solve some of those problems. And we've done a bunch of work in Drupal 8 in consolidating things and making things make a little bit more sense. A lot of the work that's happened to Drupal 8 can also happen to Backdrop. It wasn't all conversion of template files to Twig. There's a bunch of other stuff, and we've got an issue for Backdrop that involves making those same things, those same kind of changes for us. They're going to be a little bit different for Backdrop because of the way that we're handling blocks and layouts. Our theme region problems are solved in different ways in each system. So our theme system cleanup has been kind of on hold or working around how the blocks and layout system is coming together. But it looks like all of that's fitting together really nicely now. We've got kind of a good plan and a good cohesiveness for how everything is going to work. So that's starting to get a little bit more focused now too, which is great. And then some other things that we'd like to improve is just general user experience. Drupal has a reputation for being kind of clunky and doesn't feel great when you're an editor and you're trying to create content. So we've got some ideas for how to make that process a little bit better. We've already done a couple of terminology updates and moved things around in the administrative backend to kind of make it make a little more sense there. We're going to do a little bit more of that, maybe not too much more because we want to still seem familiar to people. And then we also want to add a rich text editor in core. This is something that is really near and dear to our hearts, but of course not maybe as urgent as some of these other things. So if we don't get it in Backdrop 1.0.0, we can add it shortly thereafter because we think we can probably add that editor without breaking too many existing APIs. So if we can do it by adding some new APIs, then that doesn't need to happen before the initial release. So things we're working on that are minor projects that aren't major release blockers are improving the identity, cleaning up the theme system, and improving the user experience. And then we've also started a new section, a list of things that need a kind of a final sign-off before we release. And this list is going to get longer as we get closer to release here. So we did a bunch of cleanup on all of our CSS files. It would be good to kind of have someone do a review of all of them, kind of a very high level, make sure all of the CSS files are in a folder labeled CSS and that they are all using the correct formatting, matching our style, our coding style, and just making sure that everything is kind of in order, ready for release, which would be great. And as we wrap up some of these other issues, we'll do the same kind of like, let's do a high-level review of HTML5, or let's do a high-level review of views integration, or whatever it is that we need a review of. And right before we release, we'll just kind of go down that list and go check, 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 check. Okay, it all looks good. Let's go. And if we can get them all signed off on, that's great. If we can't, we'll just know that we haven't reviewed that yet, and we can maybe take a look at that down the road as well. So we're getting close. It's pretty exciting. So yeah, that's the project. Other things we should talk about. This weekly meeting, we have a point here where we can announce any updates from the project management committee. So if anything has been escalated in the issue queue and needs a decision made about it, like something that would affect the direction of the entire project, that'll get escalated to the project management committee. A discussion will be had, and then a decision will be made, and it'll be passed back down to either core committers or people who ask the question, and announced in this meeting. We don't have any updates right now, but in the future, if those things continue to come up, this is the time we'll be doing that. So no updates today, but we're preserving this spot for future announcements. And then there's a bunch of other stuff that we're working on as well that aren't related to Backdrop the project, but that are related to Backdrop the community. So we have a primary website, backdropcms.org. It is going to be getting a re-theme kind of in conjunction with our release, and then shortly after that, or maybe shortly before, probably shortly after, we'll also convert it to use Backdrop. Right now it's running on Drupal 7, and then we're going to write a great little blog post on what it's like to port your site from Drupal 7 to Backdrop, and we can use our primary site as an example of what that felt like, which I think will be really handy. And then we're also going to be managing our API site. So we have an API site now. It doesn't really have a theme on it, but it does pull from our code base, which is great. So if you want to check Backdrop's APIs, you can go to api.backdropcms.org and check us out there, which is great. We're working on adding change records there, which is something that Luke set up for us. We've got a content type. We have a list of things that in our GitHub issue queue that need change records. And there's also a bunch of stuff that happened in early Drupal 8 development that's happened to Backdrop that we also need to include there as well. So making sure that our change records that happened before we fork the project get included so people can see the entire set of differences, not just what we've done since we've been working on it. And we have Ron, who's volunteered to help us write some of that documentation. He can take a look at the existing change records and port them over, make sure that, a change record as it exists on Drupal.org probably is not going to be the same as a change record on Backdrop, because Drupal has changed a lot more since when we took over the change. So we're going to need a little cleanup on some of those as well and make sure that they're still accurate. And then other things we're working on include a update server. So when you're running a Backdrop site and it checks to see if itself and its modules are up to date, it'll need somewhere to check in order to figure that out. So we've got to build one of those. And we need a GitHub service. This is a tool that will allow anyone who's creating a contrib project, a module, or a theme on GitHub to register that project as a Backdrop project. And then backdropcms.org, the primary website, will aggregate a list of all of the projects on GitHub and give you an easy interface to search and find. For example, I need a module that aliases my paths, right? You can type that into the Backdrop website, and it'll point you at a GitHub project, which I think will be super important. So we obviously have a lot of work to do. It is fall, so we don't have very much time to do it in. So we're going to be doing a sprint every Thursday afternoon after this meeting. We work online together on IRC. Our IRC channel is #Backdrop. We'll also be in the issue queue today, so if you can't join an IRC but you want to participate anyway, if you check the GitHub issue queue, you can help weigh in on feedback we've had about things that we need to do or test things for us, write pull requests if you're feeling brave. We could use help with lots of stuff, and we'll be doing that all afternoon. And then we've also finalized our next in real life sprint, which will be at Bad Camp, which is in November. We have blocked off a table in the coder area on Sunday, November 9th, where we can get some work done on Backdrop the project. So we'll probably do a session about it on Saturday. We'll see. Nothing's been scheduled yet, so we're hoping it'll be Saturday. But hopefully we'll do the session first and then the sprint after. But we'll see. It might have to go the other way around. So, in real life sprint on Sunday, November 9th, if you want to come to Bay Area Drupal Camp, that's a good place to meet everyone, and it's just a great camp anyway. Might be personally biased. And then there's a bunch of other stuff we're doing too. We have been requested to give a talk at the Pacific Northwest Drupal Summit, so I submitted one on Backdrop. I'm not sure if it's been accepted. I haven't heard anything from them yet. It might still be early, and they don't know what they're doing yet, but I'll follow up on that. We've also got a talk coming up at the HTML5 Developer Conference here in San Francisco in October, where it'll be the first time we're pitching Backdrop to people who don't necessarily know what Drupal is. So we've got to sell the product kind of on its own merits, which I think will be a fun challenge for us. And then Badcamp itself, and we've also been requested to give a talk on Backdrop at 2 upcoming DrupalCons. Both DrupalCon South America, which is in Bogota this year, and also at DrupalCon Los Angeles. And originally we've been pretty careful about not proposing talks about Backdrop at Drupal events, but because I've been asked by actually 3 of them, there's a DrupalCon in India they also asked us to speak at. So I submitted a session to the South America camp about Backdrop, and asked the person who requested that I submit it to run that by the people in charge of the conference just to make sure that it was okay. And even though he really wanted me to submit the session, apparently the Drupal Association has decided that Backdrop talks shouldn't be sessions at Drupal events, but they can be BOFs. Because apparently all sessions at Drupal conferences need to be about web designer development. So I guess we don't qualify for that for some reason, but that's okay. I think it's fine. I'm excited that we have been requested by the organizers of these conferences to give talks at these events, and if we aren't actually allowed to give the talk, I think that it's fine. There's still a demand in the community for people to hear about it, and as long as we continue to give talks some places and post videos, then they'll hear. So I think it'll be okay. And if we do go to the event anyway, we'll do talks on webformer panels or Badcamp or I don't know, something else more Drupal related, keep everyone happy. So yeah, we'll probably not be presenting on Backdrop at these places, but I'm super excited that we've been asked anyway. Okay, well there's no one else here other than me and Nate today, but I can see that there's some people watching, which is nice. If anyone has any questions, you can go ahead and ask us on IRC, or you can tweet at us at Backdrop CMS. Or, yeah, I don't know, Nate, if you have anything you want to add at this point?
No, I don't think so. I'm just rolling along with things. There's a number of pull requests that are out there. I'm getting to review them as soon as I can. So if you were one of those people who has submitted a pull request, thank you very much. And we'll get to it soon. Oh, and other people that have submitted pull requests, it's not a bad idea to review other people's pull requests. That would make my job a lot easier and speed up the whole process if there was more reviewing going on.
Okay, so come review, chat, hang out. Thank you for the interest, and yeah, we'll see you next week.
All right, thanks everybody for joining.
Day.
Bye guys.